And I think this early days Batman, I wanted him to be not in control. I felt like he should be driven more by his shadow side than he was even aware of. That he thinks he's doing something for the city, but he's really doing it because he can't figure out any other way to make sense of his life. And I thought that would be an interesting kind of drive. So
What's really cool about a character like Batman is that there have been so many different interpretations over the years. West and Clooney are very campy. Keaton is this gothic ringmaster of Gotham's criminals. Kilmer is a mix of those two styles, where Bale is not only more realistic, but out of all the Batmen, he's the most developed character-wise. And most recently, Affleck played a more unhinged and fundamentally untraditional take on the character. The Batman not only manages to tell a unique story within the Batman mythos, but it also manages to give us one that is so true to the character, solidifying its place alongside the best Batman adaptations. It immerses you in its Gotham City and puts us in the shoes of Robert Pattinson's Batman. There's rarely any scenes without him, and even more so, there's rarely any scenes with him out of the suit. Pattinson portrays the character in a way we've never seen before on screen. This is a Bruce Wayne that hasn't quite figured out what it means to be Batman yet, and because of that, he's riddled with the implications of his actions. This is a very angry Batman that embodies vengeance. He is solely focused on striking fear into the hearts of criminals, and takes pride in physically dominating those who break the law. Characters rarely refer to Bruce as Batman. Rather, Bruce, Selina, Riddler, and Penguin call him Vengeance. Although Bruce has been Batman for 2 years, he questions what true effect he's had on the city. Crime is at an all-time high, affecting every facet of the city. The people, the police, the politicians have all succumbed to the darkest depths of corruption. The movie even starts with a young boy losing his dad to the hands of a madman, repeating the cycle of trauma Bruce endures every day. Despite dedicating his family's legacy to stopping injustice, this is still a Gotham City without hope. So, is Bruce's vengeful cry for justice really the answer? This question is at the heart of The Batman, making it one of the most beautifully nuanced superhero movies to date. Pattinson wears Bruce's rage towards the world on his sleeve, expressing it only in physical cues. His gaze is so powerful, as you could tell what emotions he's going through without an utterance of dialogue. Fans have been campaigning for a Batman with the comic-style white eyes, and Pattinson's performance makes me disagree with this notion, as his eyes are a gateway to this Batman's soul. The best example of this comes from the very beginning of the film. Gordon mentions that the mayor's son was the one who found his dead body. Batman stops to look at the boy who's alone and surrounded by cops. From this one interaction, Pattinson perfectly conveys a relatability to this child because that child was once him. A scared little boy who lost a loved one. There's layers of sorrow and regret that Bruce failed to prevent this, and most importantly, there's an undertone of anger towards the world as a reflection of his trauma. It's trauma that leads a majority of these characters to enacting their own personal vengeance in a way that only perpetuates the cycle of injustice within Gotham. The film isn't afraid to draw comparisons between the Riddler and Bruce. Both get their own POV shots as they stalk potential victims behind a pair of binoculars. Both write their observations on the state of Gotham's corruption and the toll it inflicts on them in journal entries. Both are orphans subjected to trauma as a result of the failed institutions sworn to protect them. And most importantly, it's that trauma that motivates them to wreak vengeance on the perpetrators of justice from the shadows. Although the Riddler is a psychopath, his goal is not too dissimilar from Bruce's. In fact, that's the very reason why the Riddler is so fascinated with the Bat. Selina's trauma comes from the death of her mother, as well as the neglect from her father, who's revealed to be Carmine Falcone, the most powerful man in all of Gotham. This is incited even more once her girlfriend is strangled to death by Falcone. She quickly becomes consumed by vengeance, going against Bruce in order to kill Falcone for taking away her loved ones. And she feels as though the world owes her something. This is not too dissimilar from the Penguin, who also feels Gotham owes him something, going as far as to take it by force through his rise to power in the mob. We don't know too much about him, but his physical appearance alone clearly tells a story. He looks like his years in Gotham have had a heavy toll on his body. He literally has scars all over his face, and scars, whether physical or mental, are a subtle motif featured throughout the film used to portray trauma. Bruce even mentions this as he states the city is just as scarred as he is. This is shown to us through the set design. This is the filthiest Gotham to date. Everything looks dilapidated, from old train cars to the muddy streets, and with decade-old signs seeping into the structures that only remind the citizens of a broken promise of renewal. Every time Bruce interacts with the common individual, there's a distaste and anger that's expressed towards the elite who live above the people. Gotham can't truly change because these characters, and the city as a whole, are stuck in a never-ending cycle of apathy, and that desire for change. That response of vengeance only incites the cycle even more. Bruce realizes this when a Riddler goon throws his iconic line back at him. Everyone thought it was cool in the teaser when Pattinson says,
"I'm vengeance."
But when the Riddler goon says that very line, it's haunting as it solidifies that Batman is only inspiring more violence. Bruce's journey is quite beautiful and easily one of my favorite arcs for the character to go through on film. A lot of people will criticize that this Bruce doesn't have a playboy persona, but it's so crucial to this story that he doesn't, as it means he's isolating himself from any meaningful human interaction. He isn't emotionally stable enough to even have a relationship with Alfred. His fear of losing someone he cares about, the same way he loved and lost his parents, is the very thing that prevents him from being in touch with his empathy. When it comes to those less fortunate than him, those who project their anger on the others, Bruce doesn't pull his punches. This is a Batman who sees the worst in people, and the film doesn't glamorize that. Batman wails on goons and other characters watch in horror. Gordon has to repeatedly step in and hold him back. It isn't until Alfred is close to dying when Bruce can finally start to realize that he's still that same scared boy from the alley. After every scene shared between the two where he neglects Alfred as a member of his family, he could finally take a father's hand and let him in. It's the first scene in the entire film where we could finally hear Bruce be vulnerable, and in some way, he could come to terms with his parents' death. Something quite special about this film is how it's not so much about what is said, rather what isn't said. Bruce says he's afraid to lose someone close to him, but what he means is Alfred is someone close to him. He calls Gordon a good cop when he thinks his time as Batman has finally come to an end, but what he means is that Gordon is a good friend. Bruce obviously has a lot more room left to grow, but these steps are in the right direction away from just being a nocturnal animal and into someone more empathetic. By the end of the third act, when Gotham is flooded and its people are trapped under the very walls meant to keep them safe, all hope seems lost, and Riddler's vengeance is all but complete. There's nothing more powerful than Bruce simply putting his hand out in the same way Alfred did to him, and lifting the citizens of Gotham up from their darkest hour. The young boy from before, the scared boy who lost his father, is the first to take the hand of the Bat, and chooses to move away from fear, inspiring others to follow. In the end, it wasn't Bruce's vengeance that saved Gotham, but his empathy. And it's that empathy that restores hope in the people of Gotham. Bruce originally set out to strike fear in the hearts of the people, but what he accomplished was giving the people a dramatic example to shake them out of that apathy. He gave them a hero to strive behind. Finally, the implications of his actions no longer haunt him. Bruce understands that Batman has to be something more than just a personal vendetta. The bat signal from the beginning of the film compared to the end of the film has an entirely different meaning. It's no longer a tool for fear, it's a symbol for hope. As a Batman fan, nothing was more satisfying than to see Batman stand with the people of Gotham as they look at him with the belief of a better tomorrow. The movie not only ends with dark days ahead, but with the hope that Batman will be there to stand up for the people of Gotham. I think that's what makes Batman such a compelling character and, personally, my favorite superhero, as there's something so inspiring about the idea of a man taking all of his negative emotions, all of that trauma, all of that anger towards the world, all of that self-hatred, and turning it into something positive. It's the hope that we too can rise above our scars and achieve real change. That's the true power of the Batman.